We're staying on that with the Chief Executive Officer of Nairametrics, Mr. Ugodre Obichukwu, speaking on inflation. We saw those numbers on Saturday. Inflation, headline inflation now is at 33.95% in May relative to the April 2024, which was at 33.69%. And of course, that was released by the National Bureau of Statistics. Let's see what this means to everyone, especially in the midst of the celebration with Mr. Ugodre Obichukwu. Mr. Obichukwu, good afternoon. Happy holidays to you.
Good afternoon. Happy holidays to you too, and to your listeners, your viewers.
Yeah. So last month, when we saw the inflation numbers, we saw that the rate of increase was reducing. It doesn't seem like we can say the same for this month.
Well, I think we can. It's still reducing. Month-on-month inflation, I think we've seen I think this is the third consecutive month of month-on-month inflation that we've seen. So that should, at least, is a bit of a reprieve. All items was 2.3% in April. It has fallen to 2.1% in May. It was 3% in March. We also seen similar trend with core inflation, which is usually my own favorite inflation data, because that sort of strips out the volatile food inflation. We've also seen two consecutive month-on-month dips, which is good. It's gone from 2.4% to 2.1% to 2%. So that is also good. So yes, to that extent, we've seen dips. However, we do see spikes in transport inflation month on month. So it's gone from 1.7 in March to 2.1 in April to 2.4 in May. We've also seen a little bit of spike in restaurant inflation as well, month on month. But overall, I think there's still a lot of concern. Inflation is still at, I think, a 28-year high, if I'm not mistaken. I think the last time we saw anything close to 33.9% was in April or March 1996. So you can imagine the sort of territory that we'll find ourselves in this country. So pretty much high inflation. Core inflation is also at 26.4%, which is also higher than the 26.2% we saw last month. And then even on an average, if you look at an average inflation rate, which a lot of people tend to look at as well, especially for long-term planning, average inflation rate is getting close to 30%, currently 29.1%. So it's still a lot of challenge out there. And a lot of people who look at these numbers will also tell you clearly that maybe this doesn't even reflect their own personal inflation stats. People are telling you that they are seeing prices of goods and services more than double already, perhaps maybe because of the festive season. But we're seeing prices go up a little bit of basket, just a small piece of tomato out there, maybe like 4 or 5 pieces, and it's going for like 2,000 naira. So as much as people would look at 33.9% as inflation numbers, but the reality for a lot of them is the actual amount of money they have to dole out every month. Purchasing power is getting thinner and thinner on a daily basis. People are really struggling, and no one really knows how we get out of this. But so far, so good. At least the only silver lining here is that month-on-month inflation seems to be dropping.
Yeah, well, Mr. Obichukwu, I was hoping you would not mention tomato, because tomato and pepper are areas you don't want to mention to any woman at this time. It's really a big deal. And I know about 2 weeks ago, the NBS had hinted that they're going to reorientate the baskets measuring inflation. Perhaps if they do that, I hope they won't do it the way they did the unemployment data, then it might capture more realistic numbers of inflation and purchasing power in the country.
Yes, I agree. And without, being prejudiced to the outcome of their rebalancing of the basket, which a lot of us have called for years, I think it's been overdue for over 3-4 years now. A lot of what the MBS considers as what Nigerians spend money on has changed over the years.
Looks like we have a little bit of technical hitch there with Mr. Obichukwu. We hope to have him back because we certainly do have a lot to explore. For instance, he did mention that the fact that there's a spike in transport inflation, but we know that another major driver of inflation numbers in the country is food. It's a major one. And okay, you're back, Mr. Ogudre. Thank you so much. So,
yes.
Okay.
Apologies for that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that it's about time they change that basket. And I agree with them that they change the basket because what we consume now is not the same thing as what we're consuming several years ago when we currently use this basket. For example, we all consume a lot of data, and data is a major cost for a lot of people. So that basket needs to change. However, if it does change, I think a lot of people will be careful to see whether it reflects their reality. Now, whether it means lower inflation or higher inflation, at the end of the day, data is data, but people would always relate data with their reality. So if the reality is not what is reflective of what they are seeing, if the data is not reflective of their reality, I think that sort of discredits the entire thing. And I want to believe that the NBS is very much aware of this, and they will definitely, provide what people would believe in. They will provide data that people believe in. What is important as well is that let us even have an inflation number, inflation basket, a CPI that is reflective of what we currently consume. And we all know that it has changed drastically. If you ask me, I don't see how it would improve the numbers. I doubt it. I probably think it might even be worse than we are currently seeing. But what is important is that let's even use the right data. I think that's what's important for us.
Yeah, a lot of people have already said that they do think that the numbers will look worse. But at least, as you said, if we have data that actually captures the reality, then we can have where to work from. And talking about where to work from, I was just talking about the drivers of this inflation. You mentioned transport. We hope that with Dangote's petrol, is supposed to start next month, we've been assured and reassured that will help in that aspect. But it seems one area that we're still waiting for reprieve is the area of food, which is also a major driver of inflation number in the country. And we've seen insecurity continuously stop farmers from going to the farm, thereby reducing supply of food to the country. That's why you mentioned tomatoes and peppers and, everybody's hearts, it goes into their mouth.
You're very correct. And the fascinating thing about the inflation issues that we're experiencing at the moment is how complex it is. So it's one thing to ascribe inflation to exchange rate depreciation, to removal of fuel subsidy, and all of those things. Yes, they do impact inflation, but there are still structural issues which also bedevil inflation, which you've sort of like spoken to. There's insecurity. It's still there. There are farmers who can't even get produce from one part of the country to the other, and farm yields are still pretty much low. And you're also seeing a lot of players in the supply chain closing shop. We put up an article yesterday where we interviewed farmers to try and find out why egg prices are skyrocketing, and they're telling you that look, most poultry farmers are also closing shop. So yes, apart from the fact that feeds are expensive, but even the value chain itself is now reducing because a lot of people are saying, look, man, I can't bear this anymore. I'd rather just close my business and look for something else to do, maybe jackpot or whatever. So these things all add to inflation. So yes, it's one thing, for Dangote refinery to come on stream, which we all have been waiting for. That would help inflation to a large extent. But a lot of structural issues still remain. And a lot of these things are issues that have, that might take time to fix. And so that is where I worry. For us. And remember, there's still that little issue of minimum wage and what impact that might even also have on broader inflation. So we're not out of it yet. Inflation is likely going to be sticky for a long time, and it's not going to be an easy ride. And that's why when I hear people say, oh, maybe inflation is going to taper down towards the end of the year, I'm not that optimistic because I feel like there's still a lot of price adjustments that needs to be made. A lot of organizations have not yet adjusted their prices yet to reflect their own reality. Remember, a lot of company profits we've seen over the last few weeks or few months have all resulted in losses. A lot of them have taken on losses, yes, albeit paper losses. But at some point, they have to find a way to clean up their balance sheets. So you're still going to see a lot of price adjustments happen down the line as things start to improve for people. So inflation is not going anywhere soon until maybe we start to see a lot of the structural issues and a lot of the other issues that affect inflation start to, reduce. And that it's not something that you see happen in the next 6 months. And I doubt that you even get that in the next 1 year.
And the central bank governor has told us that as long as inflation is surging, interest rate is going to keep going up. And we know also the after effects or the spillover effect that has on the real sector.
You're correct, and speaking to the central bank as well, you do know as well that there's also an aspect of the central bank's monetary policy tool that is also affecting businesses, albeit they're doing it because that's the only tool that they have to fight inflation at the moment, which is increasing NPR. So that is also a sticking point. So interest rates for borrowing is at multi-year highs, at over 30-35%. And so businesses have got to find a way to pass that cost through. So, and you can't blame the CBN. That's the only tool that they have to fight inflation, even though that has its own negative effects. So those are the challenges that I see down the line. I hope you can still hear me. Yeah, yes. Those are the challenges that I see down the line. And without putting all these things in a bucket and trying to find out, perhaps a long-term view of solving it, we're always going to come back here. And that is why we've always said, look, we do have a coordinating minister of finance. We have, the sort of central bank that lots at hope for. We have
So I think we have that break again with Mr. Obichukwu. Mr. Obichukwu, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, so we lost you again. You want to conclude your thoughts?
I'm sorry. By the way, I don't know. We've also been hearing that network issues have inflation has a lot to do with network issues.
Oh,
but that's
wow.
a story for
There's inflation on the network now.
I'm telling you, trust me, there's a connection there, but that's for another day. That's the story for another day.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the point I'm basically trying to make is that we need to have authorities, that's the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, and everyone who is in charge of the economy sit down and tell Nigerians, look, this is where we are on inflation. This is our inflation target in the next 1 year, in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years. We currently don't have that. A lot of the inflation targets that we see was in the outdated MTEF. That's the medium-term expenditure framework. So we need to see inflation targets that is clear and how they plan to bring down that inflation. If you're raising interest rates every time you have MPC meeting, what is the inflation target that we're trying to achieve? What are we trying to do with security, and how is that going to impact on inflation? In terms of Dangote refinery that you've mentioned that's going to come on stream, what impact would that have on inflation? So we need to see a lot of this research done by the team and a lot of these targets put out there so that maybe people can start to have a sense of, okay, you know what, maybe let's just buy into what the government is trying to do, and they've given us 1 year or 6 months or 2 years or whatever for these things to start to dissipate. And then we can start to track, which is exactly what the Buhari government didn't do the last time. So let's see that happen. Because I think that is really where we need to be now. Because as things stand, there's just so many issues, a myriad of issues that is affecting inflation rates. And I don't see how we solve this in silos. So the central bank can't be fighting inflation with their monetary policy tool, and then you have the fiscal side not also try to fight this in their own way, and which we're not seeing much of. We don't know what the plans is in terms of insecurity, how you plan to help farmers, what sort of support that you need to help with the value chain, that we see that is reducing on a regular basis. How do you deal with imported inflation? By the way, imported food inflation is also like at almost at multi-year high as well. So it's as if there's a barrage from all over the place. And right now, what you need is, a collaboration between fiscal monetary policy and then them sitting together and crafting out a plan. Nigeria needs a plan, a new plan, a growth plan. Nigeria just needs a very clear plan, a new deal on where we go from here. At the moment, that is what is lacking.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people will tell you, Mr. Obichukwu, we do have plans, and they all sound beautiful if we go back to our papers. But when it comes to implementing those plans, it seems, something just happens and we miss it. But as you said, there are so many faces to this, and we hope to get the solution as we continue talking about it. But thank you so much, Chief Executive Officer of Nairametrics, Mr. Ugodre Obichukwu, for your time, and do enjoy the rest of the holiday.
You too. Bye.
So it might be harsh. Inflation is high. Tomatoes might be almost too expensive, but we'll get through it. We're Nigerians. We're strong. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll head to the market. The markets are closed today, but I wonder what Aniti has to tell us. He does have something to tell us. So join us after break.